show starts in a sleepy little town down around Anzio. And the guys are prepping for another game, reading SSR. The orchards in this one are strange, always the season it seems. Talking about olive groves, olive groves. Oh, olive groves. Well, the MF and the MP, they provide double. Groves have a hindrance of one. Though it's not quite apparent, they are inherent, and TEM is one. Some say that this rules the name, but it's part of the game. Oh, talking about olive groves. Ho, ho, olive groves. Oh, they grow in the Mediterranean. You find them in North Africa too. Rule A932 says, AFBs and groves can claim more advantage. That's right. Though it's part of the ASL game, the groves don't see much play. So just keep rechecking Rule F13.
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Dave. It's me, Dan Dolan. Just hanging out here, looking at my newly arrived Sword and Fire MANILA. Boy, that's a big box. I just wanted to say hello. Haven't talked to you guys in a while. Show's rolling right along toward 300. I remember back at 200 when you were thinking about retiring, becoming book reviewers. That's a good thing you left the town on that one, because you just don't fit the book reviewer type guy. And I like the interviews. You know, you put these old ASL guys on there, like me. And we're all having, like, you know, the Keith Richards contest. Who's going to live longer? You know, I was doing real good until I hit 50. The wheels came off at 50. But you guys are doing well. I like the interviews, as I said, with the older guys. I don't like these young guy interviews because I got nothing in common with them other than they play starter kit, and I have to forget everything that I've learned. You guys, on the other hand, you talk to the older people. I like that. You're talking to my generation, which is the worst generation as things go. We screwed it up. And, hey, listen, if you guys ever get around to doing number 300, I'd be happy to call in and say, I told you you'd be here at 300. Where the hell else are you going to go? Have a good day.
Hello, Two Half Squads. This is Dennis checking in. Haven't talked to you guys in a while. Say, I've been listening to the Half Squads these last couple of months, the new episodes. I'm looking forward to episode 300. But I got to say, I woke up last night thinking there's something been missing these last couple of weeks. So I enjoy the box art review sometimes, and the interviews are pretty okay, and the box art, what's in the box kind of thing, that's tolerable sometimes. But I figured out what's really missing are those parodies. They open up the show, they set the tone, they're clever, they're funny, they're relevant, they just make the show. I can't say enough about them. So there you have it. Thanks for all your hard work, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Hi, Dad. Hi, Jeff. It's Aaron. Congrats on your 300th show. That's pretty impressive. And, you know, I have to admit, I'm a little surprised you made it that far. You know, the kids these days don't really care about ASL. I think it's kind of lost its novelty. But hey, I mean, congrats. And here's to 100 more if you're lucky. And also, I do want to mention I really, really love the music. You know, that one Rule song. It's super modern, super fresh. I think it gives an air of youthfulness that is much needed at times. So, congrats.
Hey guys, just calling in to tell you how much I enjoy your work. You guys are great. Dave, I love your English accent, and Martin, your accent is cool too. Illuminating Rounds is such a great show. Fabulous work, boys.
Hi guys, it's Alan from Edinburgh here. Hope things are all well with you. Congratulations on 300 episodes. I must admit I've liked several of them, especially show number 38 and 156. Show 200 was okay too as well, I guess. But otherwise the rest of them could have been a lot better, guys. But still, 3 out of 300 isn't too bad, I guess. Take care, guys.
Hey, Jeff and Dave, it's Stu here from Vaseline with Stu. Just wanted to say congrats on 300 episodes. The shows are pretty good. I particularly like the part of the show when, well, let's see. Maybe the segment's on, well, not really those, I guess. Oh yeah, the parts when you guys, maybe when, oh yeah. The interviews, those are great. It's nice to hear people who actually know ASL and know what they're talking about. Yeah, the interviews are great. So keep up the good work, roll low, and continue to rally well.
Hi, Jeff and Dave. It's your grandma calling. I'm enjoying a lovely summer's day in my garden outside. Congratulations on your 300th show. I still do think it's a waste of your time. Should have stuck with teaching, Dave. Should have stuck with that. But ta-ta for now. Enjoy it. Toodaloo.
Hey guys, this is Chris. Congratulations on your 300th episode. You know, it's amazing how when I tune in, I get perfectly timed advice as I'm dealing with my own dental health and rodent issues. Thanks, guys, for that 299th episode. Your ASL content is okay. And now that you're starting to get the hang of this thing, I think after another 300 episodes, you're likely to convince some unbelievers that Advanced Squad Leader really is the greatest game in the world.
Hey, I hear you fellas know the rules real well, and I've been losing a lot of games because of those doggone rules in ASL, and I was hoping y'all might direct me to a good rules lawyer. I hear those guys really know what they're doing and could mentor or tutor me into some good wins. So if y'all know of anybody, let me know. Thanks.
Hello, yes, guys, it's Perry over at MMP, just calling to give you a cease and desist order, and our lawyers will be in touch. Take care, guys.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Two Half Squads, the one and only podcast dedicated 100% to the greatest game in the world. What is that, Dave?
Advanced Squad Leader.
That is correcto. I'm Jeff.
I'm Dave.
This is episode 3000.
Close.
300. Episode 300. It's a big day. And we have special guests with us today. We have Rich Spilkey. Raise your hand, Rich.
Hey there.
Very good. Rich follows instructions very well. Mike Rizzi, raise your hand. There it is. Yes, it's floating off screen. And Jared Spilkey, no relation to Rich Spilkey. Oh, no, maybe there is a slight relation there to Rich Spilkey. Very special guest speaking on behalf of a group. So,
Jared, how is it that we're honored to have your presence here again?
Well, I know it's my job to appear every 100 episodes. So sure enough, I've appeared on the 300th episode, episode 100, episode 200, episode 300. So like clockwork, I'm here.
It's amazing. We'll see. I guess we'll see you next at episode 400.
Yeah, I'll see you guys again in 100 episodes.
I'm already looking forward to it.
Don't hold your breath, friends.
So 300 is a number. Somebody might say it's a milestone. Somebody might say it's a tombstone. I don't know. Does it mean anything? Not really. It's just a number.
It is just a number.
It's just a number. It's like my IQ, 300. It's just a number.
In fact, once people see the content of this show, they'll realize it is just a number.
Yeah. People are going to look for this and say, oh, I've never seen this show or listened to this show. I'm going to listen to the episode 300. I'll bet it's really good. Yeah. We'll tell you right now. It's going to be like the rest of our shows. Not that great, but good. Yeah. So anyway, we're here. Dave, how do you feel about 300?
About the same. Yep.
Yeah.
You could tell from those phone calls we got that opened the show. Yeah.
Yeah. Is anybody drinking a special beverage?
Special mug.
That's a beautiful mug. Where'd you get that?
Well, Jeff, about a month ago. This is where the 300 has kind of a special tone, because so in the mail, this arrives along with Jeff's mug.
This? No, this.
We received these special mugs. No one told us who sent them. We don't know yet who sent them. And we're like, oh, Jeff, look, somebody actually thinks 300 is a big deal. So, and then a few days later, are you ready for that, Jeff?
Normally we don't open anonymous.
We received our own ashes from our own cremations. So we got them. I don't know how someone got my ashes.
No, we got something better than ashes.
What's in the box, Jeff?
Oh yeah, let's do it. What's in the box? It's not your ashes, but it might be like a headstone.
I think I am going to put it on my gravestone.
I don't know how we get a good shot of this, but for people listening in Radio Land, these are like crystal obelisks, about 11 inches tall, with the 2 half squads emblem on it and our names and 300th episode. And can you read the inscription there, Dave?
Yes. In thanks and appreciation for your devotion and dedication to the ASL community, Rolo and Rally Well, April 16, 2008.
That was our first show. So that's pretty nice.
Crazy nice.
Yeah.
And you
heavy.
can, like, if you have a home intruder, not only can you bludgeon them, but you can spear them.
Yeah.
Like right into them.
You could split them. You could split.
Very versatile.
Yeah. So do we know who sent these?
No. I think Dennis. I don't know, really.
That's really nice. Super nice. We are very honored that somebody would go to all that trouble.
Yeah, Mike, do you have a trophy?
I don't have a trophy.
Rich, Jared.
Well, you guys were nice enough to give me with the 2 half squad shot glass.
Oh, I have one of those too.
As a little memento of my participation from time to time.
Oh.
And I would say, you guys are a little hard on yourselves, I thought, there on the front end.
Yes.
I'm sure Mike might agree, but I fell in love with you guys the first 100 episodes or so, and I have listened to every single one. Now, yes, some are better than others, no doubt about that. But mostly they're really good and they're really entertaining and they're really interesting. And I think you guys have done a remarkable job. And these gifts you're getting and these kind words you're getting from people are a testament to that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Rich. Thank you. And your check's in the mail.
But yeah, being humble, it was cool to get those things ahead of 300.
Yeah. And it has been really an honor to do this show, and people like it. We haven't had anybody. One person wrote and said they didn't like it,
except for all those call-ins at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, But the rest of the people that don't like it don't bother to tell us that they don't like it, which is very nice. But it has been a really good honor. We've done some great interviews. We've met some great people. It's given us opportunities that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And so,
Well, I don't think you guys give yourself enough credit at all from your place in history. You know, when I first met you guys before you had even started the show, there was nothing like this, and in wargaming or ASL alone. And once your podcast came out and you're still at it all this time, dozens of these kinds of things have come and gone. But you guys are still here, setting the benchmark, having created this format. Here we are.
Well,
a long time.
Although the visual benchmark's been moved way ahead of us.
Well, yes. I mean, yes, you've inspired them all, though.
Good
I don't think there's
job,
anybody
all.
who does any of the new other content with the things they bring to the table, but I think they all say started with you guys.
Yeah.
Well, when I first heard Dragons Landing in D&D podcast, and my friend Daryl would bring him over on a disc. He would burn them to a CD. And I would play them in the basement while I'm painting. And so we were like, Jeff.
Yeah. Dave
What do you
called
think?
one day and said, "Do you want to do a podcast?" And I knew what it was. So
yeah,
we-
when you think about the topic, advanced squad leader, ASL, one of the most detailed and complex but fascinating games in World War II tactical combat that not that many people are willing to spend the energy learning how to play. And you've made it like you've covered the whole gamut. Like some of your stuff is so funny, I have tears rolling down my cheeks. I can't stop laughing. I can't breathe. It's so hilarious that, and then on the other hand, on the serious end, you've got strategy, you've got a lot of the founders of the game and icons of the game to comment on, their work and their history and their involvement and their development efforts. So, I mean, you got box art review, you got the rules and the songs and the letters. My goodness, I mean, you have really added a lot of creativity to, I would have never thought of those things. You guys have done a remarkable job of bringing the game out and in a great way and getting people interested, and from experienced players to beginners. So, hats off to you. You were quite modest there in the beginning, I thought, and Mike thought that too, I think. But really, you've done a great job and a great service.
Well, thanks.
yeah, thanks very much.
I do remember launching when Jeff, let's see, I was at school and I think Jeff texted me or something. We're going to launch at 10 o'clock or something today. And I got on the website and I'm like, oh my God, 10 people, 15. And I'd run into the library because the guy in the library was a tech guy and he's a good friend of mine. I'd be like, Ray, there's like 40 people have hit the site already. It truly was exciting. I have memories like Jeff talking me through how to first post to Podbean a show. And I'm following his little directions and it's like hit go and watching the line. And then it uploaded. And I was like, oh my gosh, I put a podcast up.
Yeah, and that was all before really social media hadn't really taken off. The iPhone hadn't come out yet. So it was new. It was a very new medium for us. And now, of course, there are so many podcasts. I think everybody, Rich, I'm surprised that you and Mike and Jared don't have your own podcast. Seems like everybody's got a podcast. But yeah, still, we're the only ASL podcast. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, and an honor to interview the people that
Yeah.
have been involved in the game.
Yeah. But
Well, there's a lot of guys that are still crossing their fingers, maybe crossing their fingers in vain, but I hope not, that you'll still be able to land. You've landed a lot of big names, but there's a couple more big names you haven't landed yet.
yeah,
Bob McNamara, Don Greenwood come to mind. There
They
may
won't.
be more than that, and you may not be able to get them, but if you could, boy, that would be a real coup.
yes.
Would
Yeah, that would.
complete the triumvirate, right? Yeah, they're not interested right now. So
Okay.
But there's your benchmark. You can't stop the podcast until you've interviewed those two guys.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
There's the rule.
We have a goal.
Yes.
All right, so on we go. So what do we got next, Dave?
Well, how about a roundtable discussion?
Oh, okay. We have a square table here, but we're gonna
here
do
too.
we're gonna do a virtual roundtable.
And this is a concept that Mike Rizzi ran into somewhere. Do you want to tell us about that, Mike?
The discussion often comes up that what does ASL teach us, right? Historically, what is ASL about? Does it teach us lessons of World War II? Is it the game that teaches these rules? Is it the supplements? What does it do for us as a game and as a teaching tool?
Well, I'd say, first of all, it teaches me how to throw dice. When I get angry, when the dice come up, boxcars, I learn to hurl them across the room.
That's
You
it.
do it quite well.
Yeah. That's it. That really brought a tear to my eye. Oh, I learn a lot from playing the game. I mean, but I come from somebody who doesn't really study World War II that much. So I don't know all of the details of all the equipment used and the formations of units and that kind of thing. I think because of that, it teaches me. It may not, if I came in and I was very detail oriented, I'm sure I could pick apart the game. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who do that. Pick apart the game saying, oh, that's not realistic. That's not the way that tank really worked. Or in this situation, they wouldn't have used that, or units wouldn't move like this. And the fact that you have to balance a scenario in order to make it playable, they might think just throws a wrench in the whole feasibility that it's realistic at all. But coming from a background like me, it teaches me a lot. I've learned a lot about men and material strategies, nationalities that were engaged in different parts of the world that I didn't realize. A lot of really basic stuff is still full of information. Even if you're just playing Americans against the Germans or Germans against the Russians, still have an opportunity to learn a lot about the capabilities of units in general and the way they move. And I think it's been great for me.
It's definitely the greatest strength of the game, that it's the breadth of the materials presented. You can do anything pretty much now, right? I can't think of any topic that isn't untouched somewhere by ASL. And it presents the information in a very digestible format. I'll let Rich speak to the math behind it all, because that's more his forte. But when you look at the comparative analysis of tanks, troop types, any of these things in a mathematical way, you can see the relative strengths, merits, deficiencies of all of these things pretty much at a glance once you understand how the system works.
And that's pretty historically accurate, right?
Right, I would say it at least in terms of giving it a value, it presents the information correctly.
Yeah, I would say it doesn't really teach you the like political history like some games do, where you have political events that influence things, because it's not at that scale, it's at the tactical scale. But, again, teaching you though why, the stereotypical Russian soldier, American soldier, German soldier, Japanese soldier, what have you, acted like they did, or like they're perceived, in the in the movies, or in the just in the storytelling, the rules about those nations, or just the way the range and the firepower work with point blank fire and long range fire and rate of fire with machine guns and what have you. It basically forces you as the player to kind of behave the way the stereotypical commander of the Russian forces, of the American forces would behave. You're kind of forced to, if you want to do well, you need to use the troops at your disposal, to maximize their efficiency. And the rules do a great job, like the Americans. They generally have lower morale, but then they rally back more quickly. So, and they have a lot of firepower.
And that represents the fact that they were more likely to run away. Wait to attack until they could bring up more firepower, stuff like that.
yeah, they're well supplied. They often have advantages on breakdown numbers and what have you. They usually have a plethora of weapons and machine guns with lots of ammunition, as opposed to, like, let's say the Russians, who have a more frequent breakdown number that's more likely to happen on their machine guns, for example. The way the Japanese work is very unique, and the way they behave. You've got to act like the Japanese acted, with their banzai charges and what have you. If you want to win, so to speak, in the scenario, you need to take advantage of what the rules give you, and you end up, learning those tactics because of the way the rules that are granted to the Japanese units, the special rules of not breaking and what have you, and the HIP capabilities. Another thing I learned that's interesting is, and again, we could quibble about whether it's precise or not. It probably isn't precise. Like Mike said, it's just a number to, approximate things. But like I had, how, like, I guess as a typical American, before I knew about ASL, people would say, if they were talking about the Panzerfaust, they'd call it, the American bazooka or the German bazooka, and I guess that's not a terrible analogy. It's not a mile different. I guess it's okay for high level comparisons, but the way the game models, anyone who's played ASL knows that, the Panzerfaust might be a little less accurate than the bazooka, but boy, if it hits, it almost always wipes out the tank, whereas the bazooka, maybe 50-50, depending upon, where you hit it on the side or in the front and, what have you. So like, I had no idea that the Panzerfaust was, twice as powerful, roughly speaking, as the bazooka. Now, some physics guy might argue, well, it really wasn't that, it was, different than that. And I don't know. But generally, though, I've heard no one complain or argue that they've overpowered the Panzerfaust in ASL. By now, someone would have said something if that was so. And so, I don't know, it just gives you an idea of the differences and why units use the tactics they did, why the Russians did so good in city fighting relative to the Germans, whereas the Germans were much better in the open because of their long range capabilities of their weapons, both their tank guns and their long range machine guns. A great scenario is that classic scenario that's as old as ASL, just about, called Hill 621, where you've got 8 German squads and some machine guns on the big, Board 2 hill, and there's like 48 Russian squads charging at them, 48-8. Charging at them, but they almost all have like a range of 2 or 4, and they're nowhere near the Germans in the beginning. So the Germans are trying to retreat and trying to consolidate, but they're outnumbered like 6-1 or something like that in the beginning. But it just gives you a classic idea of why the Russians acted the way they did, why the Germans acted the way they did in combat, and it's a great learning experience. I mean, even think of platoon movement. Everyone wonders, because like I've studied the numbers at least a little bit, and I don't have it memorized, so I might be off of it. But the French in the 1940 invasion had more AFEs than the Germans. They had more troops than the Germans. Their tanks were better than the Germans, and the Germans still won, and they won handily. Well, a lot of it was because of the radios in the German tanks. And when you play those scenarios, and the French are hampered by radioless movement, and the Germans aren't, that makes a big difference in the game and presumably in real life. Just putting a radio in those vehicles and allowing them to communicate with each other and with the with the leaders on the ground gave the Germans a huge advantage that they were overcome the numbers. So platoon movement and not platoon movement is a rule in ASL, but so we've all read about that maybe in history books, but to actually play it out in a scenario and get the feel of what that means and how it looks and how it plays out, that really cements it in your mind.
If I can add to your point there, Rich, it's not only that those concepts you bring up, but it's the way that ASL is able to handle all those functions using the same tools within the game system. You talk about the Americans breaking, and if you read the notes about, that the concept of the Americans having the higher broken morale, having more to do with the way American troops functioned in the field, as opposed to them actually running away, more about, going to ground when they get shot at, representing what's going on with that, as opposed to them actually breaking and running away and then reforming using a morale roll. But that's simulated by the morale roll. ASL uses the same system to differentiate all these nationalities using the elegance of the simple morale table and the fire table. all of these command and control rules would add layers and layers of rules onto any other system, how the Japanese operate, how the Americans operate. But the elegance of the system is how all of these things are simulated by the same essential mathematical algorithm, using the morale table, using the fire table. And that's what makes ASL so playable. I mean, it gets a bad rap as being this huge, complicated game, but really it's elegant. It uses all of these subsystems to simulate these very different approaches to conducting World War II infantry combat by using a very similar approach that's easily understandable once you understand the core concepts of the game.
So, Mike, you're saying like the lower morale of the Americans prevents you from having to give orders to hold in position or retreat.
Right. You would have to come up with some rule about Americans advancing and, only moving so far, and some kind of limitation on their ability to, to advance because of the way they operated in the field. And you'd have to come up with very distinct rule sets for the operation of units. Same with the Japanese. It's the use of the same system of, taking a morale hit and flipping, but still being in the field without breaking. Maybe not how they really worked in the real world, right? I mean, taking a morale check by any other unit in the world just results in them running away, as opposed to the Japanese taking half casualties if they fail to check, right? I mean, that's not really what's going on in ASL, but it's simulated by the elegance of the system. It works. It's understandable, and you don't have to learn a whole lot of rules. That's what makes ASL work, I think.
Oh, can't hear you, Rich.
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry about that. It's also just cool, I think, just a cool factor. One of the reasons I fell in love with ASL is, when you look at the armor listings, it is amazing to see, all the different types. And I know it's probably not all of them. They had to make some cuts and some, they couldn't do all of them, but they generally try to represent just about every single truck and half track and armored car and, all the armored fighting vehicles, the tanks, the tank destroyers, open top, closed topped, with turrets, without, heavy armor, light armor, whatever, that's the plethora of things. And I'm sure the experts would quibble, the turret armor really wasn't that thick, or the hull armor really wasn't that thin, or whatever. Or they had, 4 other versions of this that are not modeled in Squad Leader. Well, whatever. I think it's remarkable that they've even tried to, show you the, like, what is it on the German side? I don't even remember. The Panzer III, A, B, C, D, E, F, D, and H, I, J. I think they got all, whatever. Maybe they had 5 more, but, they keep getting better as the years go by. And, you can't design a scenario in 1943 and use tanks from 1944 if they didn't exist. Well, I guess you could, but you'd be breaking, historical precedents if you did. So it's just remarkable the research that they did do to try to model as many of these vehicles, and then the infantry too. A German squad is not a German squad. I mean, how many different kinds of squads are there? There's the elites, and there's the assault engineers, and there's the, the SS, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple. The conscripts, the second liners, whatever. I'm sure I'm forgetting several, but like just even within each nationality, there's subtypes and better types and worse types and more experienced, less experienced. It's just amazing, there's not like this, it's just not like the Americans, there's what kind of Americans, early war, late war, Pacific War. It's incredible.
But again, that speaks to the point. All of those troop types are presented in a format that you inherently understand once you understand the system. The ELR system just works beautifully to conglomerate all these different troop types, differing morale levels, differing capabilities, in the beauty that is, what's on a counter. The squad leader counter is, presents all that information.
Yeah.
And all of these historical differences are able to be summed up beautifully in that system.
Yeah, I'd like to revisit the learning about the strategy and tactics in a minute, but I know, like Jeff had mentioned, I knew World War II from the war movies, and hadn't studied it really. And so for me, it was learning the hardware, like Jeff said, and like Rich is saying, all these different vehicles, I know the statistics on the vehicles are very popular amongst miniatures war gamers, right? It's kind of, I had a friend who does all miniature wargaming say, oh, you know, that ASL, people like reference those factors, armor factors and things like that. So even like the Russian machine gun, why does it have 5 portage points? Right? The thing's, it's like it's got wheels. Shouldn't it go quicker? You know, so I had to look up the pictures of the weapon and oh my gosh, that's bulky. It doesn't, you can't take it apart. So you're learning a lot about the technology. It got my motivation going, you know, oh, I'm playing this game. This is exciting I want to know what it really looks like. And then I know with Dave Timonen, a lot of what I'm doing as he's really getting into the game is trying to bring up the history. Like, oh, let's Google a picture of that vehicle. And he looks at it like, oh my gosh, that thing is open on the top. And I'm like, that's what I keep telling you, open top. You know, it's the white. Well, the white means it's hard for him to get. Oh, it's easier to throw a grenade in, but look at the picture, you know, that kind of thing. And then like Mike was saying about the troop types, or Rich was saying, he's really learning like, oh, these guys, you know, are not trained. He was having a problem with the 2 range versus the 4, 5, you know, I was like rifles, you know, submachine guns and stuff like that. So definitely that aspect of it's there. But isn't there a problem with the tactics, or was that, and I didn't read the online stuff, but weren't people complaining that it's not, well, Jeff, you said that you learned some things about tactics, right? Or
Well, I just from playing the game, I don't
Yeah.
know if those are actually how tactics would be applied
well, what did you learn?
in a situation. Well, just how you, group, don't put everybody in the same hex. Keep people spread out, you know, move carefully, but keep moving. You know, keep moving is very important. You've got to weigh all of the pluses and minuses of the strengths of your troops. Things like that are really important, rather than just lining up a bunch of guys and charging.
Yeah.
You know, you have to think about it.
Even as simple as taking cover, a +3 building and a +1 woods.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, whether or not that holds up, you know, against how tactics are actually performed, I don't know. And I don't know that that it always works that well in real life anyway.
Yeah, well, and those articles on Jim Bishop's website reference the actual defensive methods and how that might work in ASL.
Yeah. One thing I've never been able to really embrace in the game that always sticks in my craw a little bit, and maybe you guys can convince me that it's a good method, good tool, well designed, is the sniper. That seems very abstract to me, about how the sniper works and moves around the board and can take shots at things, and that there's a sniper in just about every scenario. Is there, you know? So that just seems like a very random thing to me. But am I wrong about that?
Well, snipers typically acted independently, but you know their presence was felt in the field. So, and from a game perspective, it adds that extra bit of chaos that you know would happen in the field, especially regarding picking out officers, right? Because of course, who does the sniper target? The officer. So you know that we all have those horror stories.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of got to go back to the original squad leader sniper, which I sort of remember. I don't remember it as good as maybe somebody, but I do remember there was a lot more control over that as a counter in the old squad leader days before advanced squad leader. And then a lot of people complained, as I recall, this is, 30 years ago or more, that, well, that was giving you too much control. Just like Mike's saying, it really wasn't a soldier that was really under anybody's command or control. They were just sort of hunting targets of opportunity. And it's also, so I like the randomness. Maybe you don't, Jeff, but I like it. And it's also kind of a balancing, part of the game, because generally the SAN numbers are low. So if your opponent is rolling low, that means he's doing well, and you have a chance to hit him with a sniper and level things out. So I kind of like the balancing function that it also serves.
Yeah, but it's an abstraction.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True. But everything in the game is. I mean, we can talk about the tactics, and the fault in them having, with many people complain about building kill stacks because of those, those tactics weren't used.
Oh,
But
like Mike, you were telling me machine guns would be spread out more.
spread out more, right? Yeah,
With
you
like-
typically didn't see a concentration of the way we, the way the game has to be played, right? I mean, it's a foible of playing an abstract game over 30, 40 years now, where we know what to do to get things done properly within the context of the system, and it can't be faulted. I mean, that's just the nature of an abstract board game. But generally, the concepts of the maneuver, fire, surrounding, getting things to route, and having no retreat paths,
yeah.
I mean, those concepts come through. I mean, we can quibble about the fact that, at the end of a typical ASL game, you have 90% casualties on both sides. That, of course, not the experience of most battles. There wouldn't be any armies left. But that's just a foible of the game, right? I mean, you can't fault it for the way a game works.
Yeah.
But in general, those principles of maneuver, fire, and surrounding, remain true through the development of the way people play the game. So in that sense, it's successful.
Yeah, and whether that's a big strategy, right, of the pincher move, or played out in a small surrounding a farmhouse, whatever.
Right. I mean, the biggest point of ASL, of course, is the time limit, right? That's what puts you under pressure to avoid doing the obvious of, if you had forever, you would just there and keep firing, right? Because that's not how armies got things done. I mean, just the application of firepower to simply eliminate the enemy. It's the application of time as a function of the game that forces you to move as units operated to infiltrate, surround, and cause routing and surrendering. And that's how the game works.
I'd like to add also just like something that I think we're missing here, guys, which is the fun factor, which is there's some things that happen that also kind of sort of happen in real life, but there's like crazy things that happen, right? There's some crazy, wild, exciting, fantastic storytelling events that happen. We've all had these examples of I remember one time I was playing this incredibly fun scenario with an opponent, and I had to take one more hill hex, and I only had one Russian squad left, and he shot at him, and I rolled a 2 on the morale check, heat of battle, and I was so excited because I thought, yes, now I'm gonna pass the morale check because my morale is I passed it with a 2, and then I'll advance onto this hex, and I'm going to win. And I went berserk, and berserkers can't advance. And the movement phase was over. and so now, because berserkers are not able to advance. So I couldn't, so even though he was unbroken and he survived, so whatever. I had 2 single man counters, one with a flamethrower, one without. And I got shot at, and the one guy with the flamethrower got wounded. He failed the wound check. But then the other single man counter passed the morale check, and then he rolled to recover the wounded guy's flamethrower, which you're allowed to do right in the same phase there that the guy, becomes deceased, the other guy that had it originally. And then the flamethrower fired on the bad guys and got them. It was so exciting. I mean, when you imagine what was happening there, it was that, and we can all visualize this, one guy dies and passes the flamethrower on to his colleague as he's his dying breath, go get him, Tiger, or whatever. And, it's so exciting. We've had these thrilling moments, and Squad Leader lets that happen. It doesn't happen that often. It shouldn't, because, it's a crazy thing, but those things happen. And it's so fun when they happen. Bad things happen too. I remember once I was playing a player way better than me, and he hit me with a Panzerfaust, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm dead. And then he rolled a 12, it was a dud, and my tank survived, and I was able to beat him. And here I am thinking I'm such a great player beating this great player, but really, he just got terribly unlucky. Anyway, crazy things happen.
And some of that's true in war, right? I mean, Audie, what's the movie we're supposed to watch, Jeff and Mike?
The To Hell and Back? Is that what that
yeah.
So. Yeah.
And he said he had to downplay the heroics because no one would believe it. But that fun factor I've always talked about in this game, there was an Ancients Miniatures game where if you rolled boxcars, you could break through the line. And then if you rolled it high again on the second roll, it could build this great event on the battlefield. And the other miniature games don't have that. Some of them for ancients, you know, when you line
Right.
up and I thought that was great. It reminded me of like
Yeah.
Rate of Fire.
Yeah, well, exactly. If I can expand upon that point, when you talk about ASL as teaching history, and we tend to look at the, you know, the concrete facts that it gives us, units, tanks, and such, but it's the experience too of ASL. It might not be realism when it comes to, you know, maneuver or playing the rules of the game. But when it comes down to you moving that squad out into the open in a street, and you know guys did that in World War II, you're feeling that. You know, it's the experience of ASL, and it's fun and exhilarating, of course, but you can also reflect on the moment where it's like, you know, guys did this. They had to step out into a, you know, rate of fire in the open, and it gives you that feel. You know, I don't think there's any other tactical game outside of maybe a computer game, but, you know, I mean, that's not as thought provoking because here, you know it, you know what the objectives are, and you know what you're trying to do, and you know what's at stake. And I think ASL as much needs to be examined through that lens as being a great tool for giving you the experience of World War II, even if it's a little over the top sometimes with the narratives that, of course, we enjoy, like we're talking about. But any of those moments where you're taking a shot or you're hoping to, you know, make a rally roll, or, you know, those reflect some at least emotional truths that ASL brings to the table.
Yeah, and like currently Dave and I are playing a Korean War. He has to cross all this open ground and get into the building to win. And he's sitting there going, I really don't want to do this, but I think I said, yeah, you have to. And find a way. So smoke, what are we not thinking about? Use your smoke. Wear me down. Try to, you know, draw my fire or something.
And that comes with the experience of playing the game too. And I've always thought of ASL in the context of the complexity of the rules presents not only a war game, but a role-playing game in that sense, right? When you read squad leader as a title, it's not referring to the squads you're moving with the leaders on the board. It's referring to you, the player, because you're the squad leader. And you will learn as you play the game. It's the beauty of the game, because it's referred to as a lifestyle game, but it's worth it because you're trying to get the experience of being this squad leader. Technically, a company commander, I guess, is where the agency of the game lies. But playing the game more and more gets you better at the game. And you learn as a squad leader, so to speak, as you move through your experience playing the game. And it's an overlooked part of the game, because if you think about doing setup defenses, you're playing the game as you're setting up the defense. It's not just a prep, you know. I mean, you're thinking as a company commander in essence, you know. I mean, it's obviously not the real experience, but it gives you the impression of, you know, what do I have to do? I have to set up a defense. This is part of the experience. And then you play the game, you know, and then you feel, when, especially in a campaign game, when you're trying to use all the tools and you're trying to preserve your resources and know when to commit and when that objective is worth committing more troops, and all these sort of things play out, and you learn as you play more and more, and the experience grows. That's why I love ASL.
I think I get the most feeling of that when I've got to play with a poor leader. You know, if I've got several poor leaders on the board, it always makes me think what I would do as a company commander if I had poor leaders out in the field. How do you use them effectively? How can you still use them effectively without getting everybody killed? It's just something that I think about as I'm playing with those. It comes up more in that aspect than anywhere else in the game. I also occasionally think of, you know, who am I as the player? Because obviously in real life, everybody's an individual doing their individual things, but I've kind of got this God's eye view of what's going on. And I try to make some sort of a metaphor back to who am I? Who's doing this? And I get too locked up in this sometimes too. Maybe I'm too spiritual. I guess I'm too spiritual.
Yeah, Jeff, when I get into that, like, who am I stuff,
yeah.
I start thinking like of my cells in my body and molecules spinning,
yeah,
and like galaxies spinning in space. And am I just part of that.
You're
and
just
then
star stuff, Dave.
I am, Menace. I just.
You're a cardboard counter and you don't
Mm,
know it, but
yeah.
that's okay.
And then he just goes into the void. Yeah, far out. Well, you shouldn't play ASL with a black light. Stop it.
Black light.
I see Dave now going and like putting the reflective paint on all of his counters so he can do the black
Yeah.
light and play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's next step.
That would
I
be
remember
great.
when the power went out of my house on a Passel night, and we got the flashlights to do illuminating rounds. Like, wow. Well, what aspect of this have we missed?
I just want to say also that ASL as a font is instrumental in the love of the game to me, right? This has nothing to do with history, but it's kind of wrapping up what I'm kind of the ideas I'm getting at. When you look at an ASL setup on a scenario card, there's a visceral response to the way the design. I think it's one of the unsung things of the original designers, if it was John Hill's idea or whoever formatted those original scenario cards. It just brings you into ASL. There's something so profoundly original about that presentation that
Yeah, I mean, it tells you the date, it tells you the place. You know, it was, October of 1944 in this country and near this city. These units were present. Here was the situation. Here was the weather. And you are there. You are there.
Yeah.
Can you do better? And then they show you what actually happened in the beginning and what happened in the aftermath. They actually tell you. And so that it almost is presenting you with a challenge. Can you do better than the real life guys who lived it? And you're there. What do you got?
Yeah.
You know, it makes you feel like you're there, right, Mike? I mean, you're like that's
definitely
like what you're talking
that's
about.
right. Yep, exactly. There was something magical about the marketing of Avalon Hill in that era, right? They did a very good job at that whole "Are you there?" business, and it works. It works really well, and particularly in the way they present that package artistically.
You know, and that might be why I don't like some of these crazy fantasy games. And maybe we'll bring Jared into it here because I see some of the games he and his crazy friends play that are completely, fantasy. And I generally don't like those games. I guess I do like some, but generally I don't like them.
Before you get to that, I like the way both Rich and Mike had phrased and captured that feeling that I have when I see those scenario cards. Because my limited brain, all I come up with is like, is this cool? Is this cool? So well said, gentlemen. So go to the fantasy thing, Jared.
Well, I guess before I talk about the fantasy thing, I kind of just wanted to say a couple things about, I guess, using games as a mechanism of learning history. And I can't really speak too much to ASL other than I've seen a couple things on it. I've seen my dad play it a lot. But I can say that I think games are a good mechanism for learning history. I've played Paths of Glory, and as a result of playing that game, I learned a lot more about the political events of World War I, and it sort of sparked me to Google certain things like, oh, what's this card based off of in reality? And then you learn what actual event in history that card is based off of. And then I think you guys were saying this a little bit earlier, but it forces you to think like, obviously it's not real. And like when you're playing this game, you are simulating a historical event where lots of people unfortunately died, but it sort of forces you to think kind of like how those people were thinking at the time, the people who were making the military decisions at the time. And you can sort of maybe start to understand why they made some of the decisions that they made, even if you might not agree with them. And that just helps to understand like that period of history more. Like for instance, in Paths of Glory is the World War I game. In the beginning of the game, it's wide open and it's really easy to make a push. But then at a certain point, you're allowed to start entrenching. And in that game, once you're allowed to start entrenching, the war starts to get really bogged down. And so you're always wondering, should I start entrenching? But then if I start entrenching, my opponent can start entrenching. And so that game, I think, really, it really illustrates well how the war kind of started off as being very dynamic, and then it sort of became bogged down on the Western Front, and nothing was really happening other than people just dying. No significant advancements were made. So again, I know that's not ASL, but playing that game gave me a much greater appreciation for that. And it sounds like for you guys, playing ASL also gave you a much greater appreciation for, at least on a tactical level, of what was going on.
Yeah.
I could say the same thing about Here I Stand or Virgin Queen, which are also historical period games. They're not tactical like ASL, but I mean, when each card is loosely based off a political event, if you just Google something, you're going to learn more about it. And it kind of forces you to learn more about history. Twilight Struggle is another good example. But yeah, I like I said, I haven't played ASL, but I do think games are a really good mechanism to learn more about certain historical periods, and kind of you can place yourself in the shoes of the people living at that time and their strategic objectives for whether you're the Germans World War I or you're the papacy during the Reformation. You know, you can start to think how they were thinking at that time.
Share the story. I'm a proud dad, so I'm asking you to share the story of when you were in college and you were in a religious studies class, I think, and they asked a question that he didn't think any of the students would know, and you knew it from playing Here I Stand. It was like the quote or something.
I took a religious studies class at college at Bradley University, and the professor put like a quote on the board, and he's like, if you know this quote, and I believe that the quote was a Martin Luther quote. He's like, if you guys know who said this quote, then you'll get extra credit. And sure enough, I'm like, oh, Martin Luther said it. And sure enough, I knew it. I sort of knew it because of Here I Stand, but I also sort of knew it because I was raised Lutheran. So a little bit of dual.
Was the quote, Here I Stand, I can do no other?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, which is literally in the game title, Here I Stand. So
I learned it from my dad, a Methodist pastor.
right. So there's that. But I definitely think games are a good way to learn history. And even though like the games are sort of simulating something that is horrific and hopefully humanity never does again, it does give you a greater appreciation of what considerations the people who were in charge at the time were having to consider, you know? So plus they're fun. Yeah, I'd say they're definitely fun. So.
And Rich, you were going to ask Jared about fantasy games, and
yeah, I don't want to make it seem like I don't play any fantasy games. I guess I do play some.
We're working on you.
But generally, I'm more of a guy who wants to play the historical games, both computer-wise and board-wise. But a lot of the games that my sons play, are, computer completely fantasy. It's like these are not historical events at all. They're fictitious, everything. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just saying, but we just got done saying that what we like about the scenario cards in ASL is it's a date, it's a time, it's a place, it really happened. They're trying to simulate the forces that were available to each side. I'm sure it's not perfect. How could it be perfect? Because nobody knows exactly how many men and tanks were there on that date and time. But they're trying to approximate it. They're trying to make it accurate, and they're trying to replicate a battle that actually occurred. And we have thousands of those scenarios in ASL. These fantasy games are not even trying to replicate anything that happened in history. They're not even. It's not even on the list.
Jared, you want to talk for?
I like some MMORPG games. Like I played World of Warcraft before. That's a video game though, so that's totally different than a board game. I haven't really played many fantasy board games, so I can't speak to those too much. But I know Mike obviously likes like D&D style games. You guys are playing like that Star Wars game, the role playing game. So I know you guys definitely like that, but I guess the part about those games I like is even though it's not real, it's like you pick your character and you gradually build it up over time and you get stronger and stronger. And in particular with World of Warcraft, Eric and I, my brother, play it together a lot. So it's kind of like a way for us to hang out and play. So there's a social aspect to it too. It's not just, it's called MMORPG, Massive Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. And I think Mike's familiar with this because he plays Star Wars The Old Republic. So he's probably heard that acronym before. But I mean, it's a whole like world, and there's actual people playing their characters in this world, and there's like a virtual currency, and you pick professions and you level up your character. And I know it's not real, but I don't know, it's just nice to lose yourself in that world sometimes and play it. And yeah, it can definitely be addicting, but I don't know. I've enjoyed playing it, but it's not for everyone. I know it's not for everyone. So
now my experience would be, I think Rich, if you could, well, okay, when I first played D&D, I'll never forget sitting in this room at college at the frat and having the first orc attack us. I mean, it's just, I was like, oh, this is so cool. I have a weapon. And now some of those weapons in fantasy worlds are based on historical stuff, right? So a lot of medieval stuff coming out of the D&D stuff. But that element of me imagining that I'm that other place, same thing, I think, when I'm manning that machine gun at Stalingrad. Is that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
I think when you're, talking about these games and from the perspective of the greater gaming audience, of course, the question isn't why are people playing these fantasy games, right? I mean, D&D far outweighs ASL in terms of player base and content. The question is, why do we obsess? Is it a generational thing that we, the guys in this forum and our friends who play this game, obsess over the minutia of ASL, right? I mean, it's not just the game. It's that we want to know this information, the difference between the Panzer III and the Panzer IV, and we obsess over these details. And in a similar way that, D&D players will obsess over their character class and the weapons and how they use them in magic spells. But that appeals to a much wider audience than us sort of more historically obsessed people, right? So I think we all know some of the reasons why, having more to do with generation. I mean, Jared speaks to it by talking about the more diverse games that appeal to him. He's not going to spend his days poring over the ASL Chapter H, wanting to know the difference between, the different American tank types and such.
Yes.
It has something to do with our generation, and and sadly, hopefully it will keep going, right? I mean, that's been the bugaboo of ASL for years. Is will it end with us? And likely yes, because why would anybody else need to obsess over something that is mostly appealing to us because of our parents and grandparents? We come from a time much closer to the war, so. To us, these differences in technology, these differences in troop types are intrinsic to an experience that we had as kids.
And that's kind of what Rex Martin was saying.
That was Rex was talking about, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. At the beginning of this show, we heard my son call in and say, great show, but young people don't care about it. So Jared, do you want to address that a little bit too?
Yeah, actually, I was talking with a coworker this morning. I mentioned I was going to be on a podcast, and it was about this World War II board game. And, one of the things he asked me about the game was, how thick is the rule book? And I said, well, I haven't actually read the rule book, but when I've seen it, it is pretty thick. And we sort of discussed, at work, like that we like board games and we definitely enjoy them, but we think that most people around our age probably wouldn't necessarily want to put in all that time just to play a game. They would, because if you think about it, there's plenty of games like Settlers of Catan, or my coworker mentioned a game called Dominion. I haven't actually played that game before, but he was saying there's definitely strategy in them, but I would imagine nowhere near as in depth as Squad Leader. And then you also have to keep in mind, like, I'm certainly guilty of this too, but I've sort of always been able to go on the internet and Google stuff and get an answer like that. And we can sort of get instant answers on a lot of things. And there's video games, and there's just so many other mediums of entertainment out there that it's very difficult to imagine someone my age wanting to play Squad Leader. Don't get me wrong, people my age love playing board games. Like, I like playing board games. I've got friends who, when me and my dad play board games, sometimes we invite them. So that we definitely do, but I just think there's so much more entertainment out there in different mediums. And then you add that to the fact that my generation is probably used to being able to get answers on things much faster. And I don't know if it's a recipe for ASL doing well with people my age, but I'm just one guy. That's my opinion. Haven't even played the game, to be honest with you. So I'm still open to maybe trying it sometime. I'm not going to close the door completely, but
I want to give.
I know that it would have a huge learning curve, right? So it would have to be something I would really have to dedicate myself to, I think.
Yeah, and we'll drag you along on that
at some point.
Yeah, I'm just one guy. Just remember that.
You and my
the
son.
burden of speaking for my generation is a great weight, but just remember, I'm just one guy, guys.
I just want to run a test on my phone with what you said about access with answers to the rule book and technology. Siri, what does a fireball spell do in D&D 5e?
Here's what I found.
She found something. It was the right answer. Let me try this. Siri, is a leader without a functioning support weapon considered armed for all purposes in advanced squad leader?
Here's what I found.
Oh no, she's just referencing a few sites you'd have to go and watch, including our podcast, the two half squads right here.
Yeah.
Now
you ain't gonna find it on our podcast.
Are there any YouTube tutorials? Like, for instance, I pretty much have learned almost everything I need to do at my job through YouTube. So like, if there's a YouTube tutorial out there on how to play advanced squad leader, I don't know if there is or not. I would hazard a guess that there probably is. I haven't looked, but
there are now. But
now, are they good?
You got an hour?
Let me add a comment. I think what everything is, what Jared is saying is very true, but it's a matter of, like, I'm going to say proportion. I'm going to use the word proportion. So like, it probably took me, I'm going to say like a 1-to-1 ratio. Let's say I'm going to play Twilight Struggle. It takes me so long to read the rules, and then I'm going to play the game X amount of times. So like, my point is, some games, what I'll call basic games, or, games that maybe Jared has played with me that he mentioned, or, Here I Stand or Virgin Queen, some of these games, you might spend 5 hours reading the rules and maybe double or even triple that playing the game. So you get like a 3-to-1 ratio, roughly speaking, of fun game time versus rules reading. Okay. And that's a total of, let's just say, 5 hours of reading and 20 hours of play. So 25 hours of your life consumed by that game. And then you might play it again someday and have to refresh your memory with the rules, whatever. Okay, so if I'm close to right, when you think of ASL, I have spent, I don't know, hundreds of hours researching the rules, hundreds. But I've spent thousands of hours, 30 years or more. I started when I was 15, I'm 57 now, 42 years, on and off, of playing the game, thousands of hours. I know, Dave, you said you've played like over 1,000 scenarios or something, and you got to figure at least 3 hours per scenario. So for you, it's thousands too, for sure. Anyway, so like, what's the ratio there? If I've spent 400 hours reading squad leader rules in my life, I'm just making that up, I don't know, but I've spent 10,000 hours playing it. So the ratio might be better for squad leader. But is a young person willing to devote that high of a proportion, even though they're going to get the payoff, or presumably they're going to get the payoff if they like it, but they're not willing to put in that kind of an investment to get the payoff?
Yeah, to anything.
To anything, yeah. It's kind of happening in the music area too, where I follow a guy on YouTube that talks about this quite a bit, where it used to be you get 4 or 5 people together that have all spent hundreds and hundreds of hours playing their instruments, and they get together and they spend hundreds of hours playing together before they're ready to cut a record. Now a kid can do it, and I'm going to exaggerate, I'm biased on this. A kid can get a MacBook and GarageBand and for the only instrument he needs to play is a McDonald's straw or something, and he can turn out a record. You don't have to have that investment in the practice and everything. And it's more appealing. They can turn out content. They get the content without the investment in the blood, sweat, and tears. So I don't know. I don't know about the future of ASL. It seems kind of grim to me in a way, but we might be surprised if we live 30 more years. Some of you will live 40 more years. Jared will live, we'll find out, I guess.
Goes around, comes around.
Yeah.
But Rich, that's a great point about that time ratio thing. And I think here's a thought too. I played Catan with the family, and it's never captured my imagination like D&D or Advanced Squad Leader. Now, is that because I'm spoiled? Like even playing Circus Maximus, right? A chariot race. You know how I was into that last week, right? I was all like, lash them. Yeah, yeah.
That was a great game, by the way.
Thanks. We got to do it again soon. But
yeah,
Catan, it's cool, but you rolled my number. Oh, I get wheat. I don't imagine I'm cutting the wheat, and now I'm gonna build a castle. It's like numbers.
Yeah.
And it's fun, but am I off on that, or is there an element of imagination? And
well, the computer
being the squad leader.
The computer takes away the imagination to a certain extent because it sort of is rendering the graphics for you, and they can make amazing graphics these days, and it's awesome.
MMORPGs,
right? Yeah, it's just in like or any video game, a first-person shooter even. But like my dad had mentioned, he's studying all the rules and stuff. Well, the equivalent in a first-person shooter game would be you play hundreds and hundreds and thousands of games. Like when I was growing up, I played hundreds and hundreds and thousands of games of Halo, and I got better and better at it over time. And then we would have, LAN tournaments for that on our Xbox. Whereas my dad was probably playing board games instead, so it's like, it's just different. Like it's not that I didn't play board games. It's just that dedication of significant amount of time for me went more to video games than it did to board games. And
and then the design,
the technology is there for it. So
the design of the Euro games, is that Mike Rizzi? Do you know? Have you thought about that? Why it's not as imaginative or gets you into it at that level, or is it more abstract?
The abstractions of Euro games is being appealing to more people. I guess is that.
So but no one. It's not just me that doesn't get into it, right? Imaginatively.
Oh, as opposed to D&D or ASL?
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, in both instances, and I think my comparison to thinking of ASL as a role-playing game still holds true in this sort of discussion too. I don't think there's any lack of people out there who love to play games or love to play complex games. D&D and ASL, I think, represent the outliers of what we would consider lifestyle games, right? I mean, D&D doesn't require a knowledge of the rules to participate. That's its biggest draw, right? You can bring in people all the time. Anybody can come in. They don't have to understand all the intricacies of all the various things that D&D presents. ASL requires a community dedicated to the game. You have to know how to play to participate in all of its aspects. I mean, not all the rules, but I mean, you have to understand the game itself. And the desire isn't driven by its complexity. It's the topic, right? You have to want to play ASL to play ASL. There's not a community aspect to the game. When you're in it, you're doing it because you want to be there, and you know about the things like overruns and when to pull out a Panzerfaust. And, I mean, this is something that drives you to play the game. Obviously not something that's going to be mass appeal to the rest of the world. People come to the game often because of its reputation for its complexity, but I don't think that's a longevity factor for them, right? I mean, they'll play it. They might be interested in play it to the point where they're satisfied having conquered the most difficult game in the world, as its reputation is. But for those of us who are in the long haul, we're here because of the topic and wanting to see everything that the game brings to the table, including now all, historical studies and all the new campaign games that keep coming out. It's the in-depth knowledge of those historical moments and scenarios that we just keep wanting more of. That's what keeps the game going, at least for now. D&D, as we say, is also like that, but anybody can participate. It's not, there's no knowledge barrier because it is fantasy. you can bring your imagination to the table and do whatever you want with it. That's the opposite of ASL, where you're trying to represent something very specific. It's a historical moment that you're trying to recreate. You can't have an imagination with it because you want things to be the way they were and learn why things worked the way they were. And that won't appeal to everybody.
I wanted to add another little personal story that compares, I guess we'll call it real life versus fantasy, just for fun. And Jared, this will be for you to comment on. So when I think I've shared with you guys, maybe not on the podcast, but I've shared with you all that when I was in high school, I was on the rifle team. We actually had rifle teams in those days, which I know today would be very politically incorrect with the school shootings and the tragedies that have happened. But when I was in school, that was actually a team in high school, and I participated in that. And I was one of the varsity target shooters. Anyway, we practiced and whatever. Anyway, so I learned target shooting, and we practiced a lot. Like almost every day, before school, after school, we went to tournaments, what have you. And so I knew how challenging it is to become an accurate target shooter, because it took a lot of work, just like any activity like that. Well, what used to irritate the crap out of me when Jared was younger and him and his brother were playing like this, what was that game you were talking about a moment ago?
Halo, Call of Duty,
Halo.
insert any first-person shooter here.
Yeah, Halo. Halo had these like blue guys and red guys that were leaping all over the place and running really fast and jumping off a bridge and going through a whatever, and they're shooting all the way as they're falling off the ledge and hitting all their opponents on the way down, as and like ridiculous accuracy that's like impossible. So I brought my sons both to a rifle range when they were like in younger age. I can't remember exactly how old they were, approximately junior high age. And, I just wanted them to learn what it's like to actually shoot a rifle at a target. And, nobody's moving, nobody's running, nobody's jumping off of bridges. They were, using the prone position, lying down, which is the most stable, easiest way to, shoot a rifle, if you know about that. And you tell them, Jared, what was it anywhere close to how easy it is in Halo?
It was just like holding the right trigger on the Xbox controller, Dad. It was just like it. And then you go prone, you hold B. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was, yeah, it was challenging, and you have to control your breathing. And it was years and years ago, so I don't remember it. I mean, I remember it, but I do remember it being challenging. And I was prone, and you have to hold your breath, and yeah. But I mean, that doesn't take away my enjoyment. The fact that Halo isn't a realistic video game doesn't take away my enjoyment of that game. I mean, you're playing a super soldier in that, who's like sort of like biologically engineered to be like a superhuman warrior. So it's not a realistic game to begin with, and it takes place in like 2300. So I don't play that to be realistic. I played it because it was a fun like first person shooter game.
Right. I understand. I don't mean to argue with you, but I just wanted to, just to irritate me that I believe that the impression that you and your brother were getting was how easy it is to shoot accurately. And it's really hard to shoot accurately.
No, video games are not real life.
Jared, did you ever play the Rockstar game?
Like Guitar Hero?
Guitar Hero, yeah.
I played it a tiny bit. I never got super into it, but I know people who did.
I know some people that really liked playing Guitar Hero, but
it's not like guitar, is it?
I asked them if they ever actually tried to play guitar, and they said, "Oh no, that's way too hard."
Yeah, right. So it's a fun game, but is it actually like playing a guitar?
No, it's not.
Exactly. So realistic does not equate to a good game, or not necessarily.
Right.
But though it sounds like Squad Leader does try to be realistic from what it sounds.
Yeah, and it's got the mechanics, as we talked about earlier, I think, that make it a fun game. Once you do learn it, because I'm thinking back to my first ASL games were a little frustrating. The guy was teaching me, right? I'm like, well, what can I do? Whereas the D&D game, as Mike Rizzi said, I felt right away fun because I didn't have to know what the damage of the sword was. He would said, roll an 8-sided. Oh, okay, roll this. Oh, you want to try this and roll this. And we just all went with it. But being taught ASL, it took a while to get to where I'm now really in the imagination part of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Just to have let go and have the fun, not have to worry about the rules. And if I play people like Rich or Even, well, Mike and Jeff, if you can tell me the rules sometime, I can just let go and have fun. Help me learn still after all these years.
Well, I think it's part of that idea that is why the ASL community is so welcoming, right? I mean, anybody who's willing to put in that kind of effort in order to participate, you want them to thrive, And I have never met an ASL player anywhere in the world who was serious, that didn't want to, welcome you and nurture you. And I think that's reflected in everything that we've seen with your podcast, with all the people you've interviewed.
Yep.
I still like sending guys out in the street just to draw fire.
You pretend they're people you don't like.
And I know there's hip units here somewhere. I'll just run these guys out in the street. You guys run out in the street.
All
right.
right.
Well, I guess we can wrap this up. We should wrap this up, but I'm still trying to think of who am I in the game?
And where are you going? And where did you come from, Jeff?
Yes.
But I meant to interrupt in the middle with a what's in the bag.
Oh.
It's our next prize, everyone.
Oh, we got a contest.
We got a contest. And it's 300. No offense to the scenario packs that we've been giving out the last several shows, but if it's a big show and I'm a big guy, should it be a big prize?
Yes. Are you going to show us?
No, I'm really relishing this moment. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Can I get
ready?
Not a drum roll. That'll be bad for the audio. Some kind of sound effect. God, Jeff used to throw sound effects at me all the time. I don't know. You listen back to those shows. That organ monkey grinder song that really threw me for a loop. Also, Rich, when you were talking about Jeff's wit, it's very true. But I listened back to episode 125 like last week. I'm trying to update the what do you call it, where we list what's on each episode index.
Yeah.
And it was funny, and we were both really witty and quick, and now I listen to us and we're just like older and slower. We can't think of words anymore. Are you ready?
We're ready. Well, I'm ready, and I'm speaking for everybody.
Bum, 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 boom, 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 boom.
I can't see it.
We can't see it.
Wait. Oh, there.
Oh,
there you go.
Doom.
Wow.
Lord and
Very nice.
Fire Manila.
It's an actual game. It's not just the box. It's shrink wrap, so you can resell it on eBay.
Nobody's going to resell that.
No, they would never do that. Don't
Who
say that.
wants to win Sword and Fire Manila? Yes, we paid for this from the listener donations, Jeff.
Yeah, we did. Thanks to everybody for your donations. Well, that's great. How do they get this great item, Dave?
That's the next question, Jeff. I think they have to call in audio.
Okay.
Like we heard at the beginning of the show, all those wonderful backhanded compliments from our listeners. Call in and tell us what they love about ASL. What do you guys
they love
think?
about the two half squads? How about that?
No,
because it's episode 300.
I know. I did think of that.
Yeah.
No.
So you can go to the website, go to our website, which is the2halfsquads.com, and you'll find a spot there where you can click and leave a message for us. And tell us what you love about the two half squads.
No, about ASL.
About ASL. All right. And then we'll do a drawing. We'll collect all those and do a drawing, and you could win Sword and Fire Manila, which is
what's the date today?
It's July 12th.
How about August 1st deadline?
Deadline of August 1st. Hard deadline.
Hard deadline.
Don't ask us to extend unless you really want to.
That's right. And no overseas buyers. Sorry, it's going to cost too much to ship.
Yeah.
To our wonderful friends in France and Iceland, Nigeria, it's just going to cost too much.
Yeah. So continental United States only.
Please.
Yeah. Continental? Will we send to Hawaii or Alaska?
No.
Okay. Canada? No. really high.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, there we go.
Unless you want to pay for the ship. Then
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to wrap up this show, right?
I guess
Right, Dave,
so.
I think
We were
that's
going to
it.
do so much more, but when you have such great guests who can talk so intelligently about stuff that I can't talk intelligently about, it makes a really good show for an hour plus.
All right. Well, that's it.
Come
So,
back, Jeff. Come
all
back,
right.
Jeff. Come back, Jeff.
300 is in the tank, and thanks for everybody for listening.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Rich. Jared.
Here's to 300 more, I hope.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. So remember, roll low
And rally well, but not
not
when
when you're playing
us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.